time, you should present something different, okay? It should not be the exact same thing with the previous work, okay? There should be a novelty in it. And then we talked about political acceptability, applicability, urgency, that it's needed really, the thing that you're doing, and that you should pay attention to the ethical concern, okay? Then we said that after having chosen the topic, you should write the title. And the title presents an issue, the problem, and it specifies the population, and it shows the time and the place of the work you're going to do. It's very important to know that this title for proposal is different from the title that you write for an article, because the title of the proposal should be specific, should be specified to a time and a place. For example, if you want to write about the characteristics of patients with COVID-19, for example, in children, the topic of your article that you're going to publish can be something that is interesting and that attracts the attention. For example, the novel COVID-19, how it's presented, for example, okay? But if you want to write this in your proposal, that is not accepted. You should say the clinical characteristics of patients with COVID-19 disease in Children Medical Center in the year 2020, for example, okay? It should be specific, and that's the difference between the title of an article and your proposal. We talked about the type of research. We said that the research can be basic, can be clinical, and can be in the HSR format. And we said that the basic research formulates theories, it focuses on principles, it improves the body of knowledge, but research done in the clinical area, it tries to solve practical problems. It focuses on solutions, and that's what you usually do in your own proposals here in Tehran University of Medical Sciences, or in the MD or MBBS. That's what you work on. Usually it's clinical research. We also have HSR proposals. That's rarely done by students, but it's related to health services. After that, in the previous we talked about the different types of studies. We talked about basic research, clinical research, epidemiological research, and secondary research. We talked about the definition of clinical trials. Clinical trials are the trials. They try to evaluate the new drugs or the new therapies. They compare the effects of a drug or a therapy in a placebo group with a group that is being given the real therapy or the real drug. Okay, it can be interventional when you really give the patient the drug, or it can be only observational with no intervention. We talked about cohort studies, that are studies that follow the patient. You have a certain trigger, and you have a certain stimulus, and then you follow the patients to see the outcome. The case control studies are the studies in reverse. You begin with the outcome and you do not follow the patients. You begin with the outcome and then you search for the triggers, you know? And then you have the cross-sectional studies. The cross-sectional studies are done at a certain point of time, at a single point, and you have both exposure and the outcome simultaneously, okay? And then you search for the relationships between the different factors with exposure and the outcome that is going to be happening after that exposure, and the relationship of that exposure with the associated factors. And then you have case reports and case series, which are types of studies that just give a report of some rare diseases, of some rare presentations. And it's rarely done as a proposal for students. And systematic reviews, the very much valuable types of studies that give a summary of the clinical literature, and they have their own specific way of writing. and they need a certain expertise in writing, but you do not need to be an expert in that area to write a systematic review, whereas you need to be an expert when you write a narrative review, because a person who writes a narrative review will write things that he knows about the subject, okay? But a person who writes a systematic review is a person who summarizes all the articles that are written in that area. Okay, I've been talking very quickly up to now because I just wanted to give a summary of the things that I said in case you haven't been present in the last session or you have forgotten something. So up to now, if you have any question or if there is anything in these areas that you need to be explained more, please ask me too. And after that, we're going to continue with the topics of today's session. I'll be waiting for your questions. Thank you, Abbas. Anyone else? Is there any questions? Are there any questions? It's clear. Thank you, Ranga. Okay, so let's begin with the rest of the proposal. For those who have joined us recently, we're going to start our session right now because we were talking about the things that we said in the last session, in the beginning of the proposal. Today, we're going to continue with the proposal writing. Okay, step 5. We will continue with the proposal sheet. The next part is the research project team. Well, that's very clear. You will write down the names of you and the professors that have helped you during the process or are going to help you for doing the research. The next step that is written on the proposal sheet is the proposal abstract part. Here, you should write an abstract of the rationale and the method part. We're going to talk about the rationale and the method part in this session. So you should just know that after writing your rationale and the method part, you can come back to this section and you can write an abstract. And don't forget that your abstract shouldn't be more than 300 words. The keywords. You are asked to write the keywords of your work here. Usually, you should include 3 to 5 main words. The words that you write here should be able to explain the whole part, the whole of your work, you know, the gist of your work. For example, if I say that the keywords of my work are children, COVID-19, and symptoms, these are the 3 keywords of my work. So you can understand that my work is going to talk about the symptoms of COVID-19 in children, okay? So one might say why that is important to write a keyword or the keywords for a proposal. Assume that I'm going to search for a certain subject, okay? I'm going to search about, for example, AstraZeneca, okay? I'm going to write a review. I'm going to write not a review. I'm going to do an original work, original study on the effects of AstraZeneca on patients who are vaccinated, the adverse effects, for example, okay? So there are several ways for me to search for the works that have been published on AstraZeneca in the literature. I enter the search engine of PubMed. If you want, I can later have a class about the ways to search. But now we're not going to talk about that. But assume that I enter the search engine of PubMed and I'm going to search for AstraZeneca. One of the ways is to search in the abstracts. I'm going to search in the abstracts that have mentioned AstraZeneca. The other way is to search in the titles that have mentioned AstraZeneca. Okay. Another good way is to search in the keywords, okay? If a person who has published an article says that one of the keywords of his work is AstraZeneca, then AstraZeneca is a very important part of his work. So that's a good article that I can read about, okay? They can read. So it will give something that I need for my research. So it's very important that you choose the keywords that you're going to write in your proposal or in your article later carefully, because it will help others find the work that they want, and it will help you be cited where you want, okay? The next step is the rationale and background part. Many people say that the most important parts of writing a proposal are rationale and background, and also the literature review, okay? This is where you can show your expertise in writing a proposal. What you're going to do in the rationale and background part is, first of all, to convince the audience why this research should be done, okay? You should convince the people that are reading your proposal and are going to accept or reject the proposal of your work that this proposal merits being done, okay? It's worth it. It should be done, okay? So first of all, you present the problem. You talk about the problem. Then you present the importance of the problem. Then you will explain about how to approach to the problem. Let's go through it with an example so that you can understand it better. Okay. Assume that we're going to talk about the effects or the association of a certain serum marker that we'll call here serum marker A, for example, on the severity of COVID-19. Okay, so the title of my proposal is going to be the association of the level of serum marker, the levels of serum marker A in children admitted with COVID-19 disease in Children's Medical Center, Tehran, Iran in 2021. Okay, that's the title of my research, and I'm going to write a rationale on it, rationale and background part. Okay, first of all, I should tell you what COVID-19 is. Maybe there are people who do not know what COVID-19 is. Maybe this proposal, this is not very relevant to this certain subject because COVID-19 is very well known. But you should just give a definition of COVID-19. You should present COVID-19, and then you should present serum marker A. Of course, there are many people who do not know what serum marker A is, like you, that you do not know what it is because I have just made it up. So I will explain about what serum marker A is, and then I will explain why doing your research on COVID-19 is very important. I will explain about the mortality. I will explain about the morbidity. I will explain about the catastrophic effects of COVID-19 here in the world, okay? And then about the serum marker A, I will explain a little bit, and I will explain about the researches that have been done in this area. Maybe there are other researches that have shown a relationship between serum marker A and COVID-19. So I have a paragraph explaining about COVID-19. I have the next paragraph explaining about serum marker A. And then I have a third paragraph explaining about the studies that have been done in this area of the relationship between serum marker A and COVID-19, okay? It is good that besides introducing the studies being conducted in the whole world, in the literature, you emphasize on the studies that have been done in your area, okay? It is very much important to know what studies have been done in your area, and it's very good to know if there are no studies done here, okay? I can emphasize on the importance and the novelty of my subject by saying that although there are, for example, 3 studies conducted in this area in different parts of the world, there is no study here in Iran yet which confirms the relationship between serum marker A and COVID-19. So the person who is reading this proposal will say that very well. So there is no study here. So this is a very novel subject. So I should give permission for this proposal to be done. I should give a grant to this proposal, okay? And then in the last paragraph, you should specify what you are going to do and the benefits of what you are going to do, okay? So in the last paragraph, you will say that we, in this research, in this proposal, we are trying to explain about the research that we're going to do that proves the relationship between serum marker A and COVID-19 by selecting these many patients, by doing these kinds of work. So we will explain a little bit about what you're going to do in one paragraph so that you can present your work well to the audience. Okay, that's what you're going to do in your rational and background part. You should know that all the phrases that you use in this part, in the rational and background part, need references. Even if you're saying that COVID-19 disease is a very catastrophic disease that is threatening the whole world, that needs a reference. You cannot use a single sentence here without a reference, except for the last paragraph that is going to be about your own work, that you're presenting your own work in, okay? And remember that in this area of the rational and background, you must cover the problem itself, the severity of the problem. As I said, that you should say it's very important, it's very morbid, it's very mortal, it's life-threatening. Many people are dying today, many people have died because of COVID-19. Distribution of the problem, maybe it's not a disease only specified. It's not a disease attacking the whole world like COVID-19. Maybe it's a disease that is most prevalent in Iran. Okay, we can say that, for example, this disease is not very known in the whole world, but it's a very important disease in Iran, or not very prevalent in the whole country, but it's a rather bit of a concern in Tehran, for example, for some certain kinds of problems. You should point out the distribution of the problem, okay? And the possible reasons, it means that the possible etiologies for this problem, it depends on the subject that you're introducing, okay? If you're introducing a subject that needs etiology, then explain about the etiology too, okay? So that's the part of the rational and the background, and I think it's very important, and it shows how much how much expertise, in fact, you have in writing the proposal, if you can write this section well. If you have any questions about this part, do not hesitate to ask me now.
Salam, Doctor.
Salam. Yeah.
In general, how long should this part be? Like how many paragraphs, or how many, in terms of paging, how many pages or something like
that? If it's not usually calculated like that, but usually it's at least one page. And the number of the paragraphs are like what I told you. There should be at least one paragraph that explains the subject itself, at least one paragraph that talks about the importance of the subject, one that if you're proposing a relationship, one that talks about the relationship, and one that talks about the previous works, and one that talks about your own research. It's usually at least four, because one is introducing the subject, the other one is the importance, the other one is about the literature review, not like the literature review, just telling about the things that have been done, the studies that have been done, and the last one proposing your own work, at least four. Okay, but you can make it longer, but try not to make it too long. It usually, for a normal thesis, there shouldn't be more than 2 pages of introduction. Okay, usually it's 1 page or 2 pages.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, there's a black box on your slides.
It's because of the chat room. I will close it now.
All right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, any other questions? No. Okay, we'll go on. Okay, so we talked about the rational and background parts. And for our friends who have joined recently, if they had problem with joining in the beginning of the session, I do announce my apologies, and we will share the recording of the session later. Okay, the next part is the literature review. This is a very important part, as much as the rational and background part. And this is where you present the studies that have been done in this area in detail, not like in the rational and background part that you just say something general about the few number of studies that have been conducted here and that there is a gap of knowledge. Okay, here you will explain deliberately what has been done in this area. First of all, in the literature review, do not jump into these studies. Okay, start with a paragraph talking about your own work. For example, you can start by saying that we are going to conduct a study about the association between seromarker A and COVID-19 disease. There are a few studies conducted in this area. I'm going to explain about these studies here in the literature review. Okay, so then you propose your first study that you're going to explain about. Each of the studies that you introduce here should be specified in these terms. You should include the name of the author, but do not need to include all the authors. For example, you can say in the study that has been done by Jones et al., means Jones and his co-workers, okay? In the year, for example, 2020, in the United States of America, okay, that's how you do it. And you also should, usually it's needed to specify the method too. For example, you can say in the beginning, in the cross-sectional study conducted by Jones et al. In the year 2020 in United States of America, okay? In any way that you want to write, you just have to mention all of these. You can say that after that, you can explain about the work that was done. For example, the association between seromarker A and COVID-19 was analyzed, and they concluded that although there were a few patients whose seromarker A was higher than the normal value, the p-value was not significant, so it could not be proved that seromarker A is associated with COVID-19. Okay, so you will explain about the work that was done, the results, and then you will move to the next paragraph, which explains about the next study. Okay, here you can provide a few studies. You do not need to provide many studies, okay, to prove your points. Just try to prove your point, to show that there are a few studies conducted here, to show what you have, what you know about the topic up to now, okay? And then try to conclude with one paragraph after proposing the studies. In the last paragraph, you will say that, as you can see, there are a few studies conducted here, but there are no studies that have been successful in proving the relationship between seromarker A or COVID-19, or there are only very few studies that have proved this point. So that's why here we are trying to do this with a very larger sample size. Okay, we hope that with this larger sample size, we can propose a better result. We can propose a more certain, in fact, result to prove whether there is a relationship or there is no relationship between seromarker A and in fact COVID-19. Remember that all you want to do in your proposal is to prove your point that this proposal is worth it, and also to keep honest. Okay, you do not need to brag about it, you do not need to tell any lies, just be honest, but say everything that you need to say. Okay, prove your point with being ethical and being honest. Okay, I have a question here. Bis has said, in literature review, it's not easy to write in a way that it leads the reader. Any suggestions for that? Also, the studies have to be arranged based on the year they were published. Okay. I can understand why you say it's not easy, but after writing a few proposals, I think you will think differently. So try to look at it in this way. You're going to start from somewhere and lead to somewhere, okay? But if that's not possible, you just arrange the articles according to the year. I can barely write one. You will be able to write many, I assure you. Okay. Okay, so if you can start from somewhere and you can lead to somewhere else, do it. But if not, if that's not really possible, just arrange them according to the year, okay? For the students of MBBS, they are not going to be strict on your proposals. Do not worry about that, okay? It's not going to be something a legendary writing, okay? Just you should show that you have really studied the literature, you know what you're talking about, and you know what you're going to do. Okay, that's enough. They're not going to bother you. I'm sure of that. Okay, and also my suggestions for that is that you really study the literature about your work. Okay, and try to formulate it in your mind. What, for example, in this exact example that I have given you, okay, you can have one paragraph, okay, you can have one study only talking about zero marker A, okay. For example, zero marker A, it's totally fictional, okay. Zero marker A was found in the year 1980 by Dr. Mark et al. Okay, so you will provide here the study of Dr. Mark et al. And you will say that zero marker A was found by Dr. Mark et al. They studied these many patients in, for example, United States of America. This study was a cross-sectional study. There were so many, for example, 100 patients, and they found that zero marker A is important in, for example, in immunity of in increasing the immune the defense mechanisms or immunity or something like that. Okay, so you have a study here that proposes what zero marker A does. Okay, then you have another study. In the other study, you talk about COVID-19, for example. You have a systematic review that is a very good study, a recent systematic review talking about the associated factors with COVID-19. Okay, so we'll say that they have understood that age is not related. Age is related to the severity of COVID-19. Sex is not related. Having a chronic disease is related. Something like that. Okay. Then you will mention a study conducted in this specific area that you're working on, the relationship between zero marker A and COVID-19. Okay, there was a study in this year, in the recent year, studied in this area. You will propose another study in the next paragraph. Then that's it. You will finish it with your own paragraph. Okay, have you understood it? Okay, and if you want, we can work on your own title too in the end of this session today. We can work on your own title, talk about how you should write a literature review on it. Okay. So that was the literature review part. Of course, you're going to put the reference of all the studies that you have mentioned the literature review. Okay. The next part is the objectives and goals part. Okay. Guys, if there is any other person than Obvious that has the same problem with the literature review, we can stop here and talk about your literature reviews and how to write them. If there is only Obvious, we will do this in the end of the session. But if there's any other person, because it's a workshop and we are going, in fact, to solve your problems. If you have problems writing this part for your own topics, let's stop here and discuss how to write them. Okay, either you don't have any problems I hope you're not shy to talk about your problems. Okay, so if that's only him, and we will talk in the end of the session. Oh, there is another person. I got an idea. Okay, I have to do it. Okay. You can always text me. Rango has my number. I will be happy to help you if I can. Okay, about the next part, objectives and goals. There are 3 objectives that you're asked to write in your proposal. The first one is the main objective, then it's the specific objectives, and then that's the part of the goals. In the main objective part, an easy way to write the main objective part is to repeat your title. Okay, you can repeat your title here. That's very easy. Okay, just remember to use action verbs like define, compare, evaluate. Okay, usually you have the same verbs in your title too. Do not be vague in writing your main objective. Okay, for example, you should not write understanding the importance of, for example, COVID-19. Okay, that's very vague. You should be specific. Then you will have your specific objectives. As you might have understood, you have one main objective, but you have several specific objectives. Okay. In the specific objective parts, you can see here, we have the SMART abbreviation for what you should write in the specific, objective part. You should be specific as it's in the title. Okay. You should use the goals that are, or the, in fact, objectives that are measurable. I think it's a little vague to start from here. Let's say, let's start with an example. Okay. We are going to write about the factors associated with severity of COVID-19 disease in children. Forget the zero marker A, okay? The factors associated with severity of COVID-19 in children admitted to Children's Medical Center in 2020. Okay, so that's the title of your work. That's the main objective, okay? But you have not specified any objective in your title. You have not said what variables you're going to work on, what associated factors you're going to work on. That's very vague. What specific factors you're going to work on? I'm going to work on age. I'm going to work on sex. Going to work on underlying diseases. I'm going to work on being previously vaccinated for other viral diseases, for example. Okay, so these are the 4 variables I'm going to work on. So write each of them individually in your specific objective parts. Okay, so the first specific objective of yours is the correlation between age and severity of COVID-19 disease in children admitted to Children's Medical Center in the year 2020. Be sure to repeat all these parts that you have mentioned already in your title here too. Specify the time and the place. Do not write correlation between age and COVID-19 disease. It's not okay. It's not enough. You should write it like in the way that you have written the title. Okay? The next specific objective will be the correlation between sex and COVID-19 disease in Children's Medical Center in the year 2020. The correlation between underlying diseases and COVID-19. You can even be more specific if you know what underlying diseases you're going to work on. If that's only, for example, pulmonary diseases, cardiac diseases, and renal diseases, you can even categorize your objectives into those. But if that's in fact vast term, do not do that. Okay, try not to write too many objectives, because if you write any objective here, you have to provide an answer to it. Okay, you cannot say later that, well, I wrote that, but I forgot to ask a few patients about this part, so I don't have enough data to report this. You were obligated to provide this objective. So if you think you're not able to find this objective later, do not write it. Nobody will ask you if you provide the answer later. Nobody will ask you why you did not write this in your proposal, okay? But if you write it in your proposal, you're obligated to provide an answer to it, okay? So that's what you're going to write. And now I can say that your objectives should be specific. They should not be vague. As I told you, saying underlying diseases might not be very suitable, okay, unless you later in your variable part specify it, okay? Either you be specific here or in your variable part. Variable part will be later. There is a table for your variables, okay? So you should specify it later. You should specify that underlying diseases means pulmonary diseases, cardiac diseases, renal diseases, and for example, immunodeficiencies, okay? Your variables should be measurable, okay? For example, you should not say fatigue. For example, the correlation between chronic fatigue and severity of COVID-19 disease, okay? So later in your variable table, you should say what you mean by chronic fatigue. You should have a measurement for this chronic fatigue. Are you going to have a questionnaire that you're going to give the patient, and the patient is going to check for severe chronic fatigue, moderate chronic fatigue, mild chronic fatigue, or you're just using this term generally? You should use something that is measurable, you can give quantity to, okay? Attainable, it should be a goal that you're going to get, okay? If you think it's hard to get, as I told you, do not write it. Relevant, of course it should be relevant. You cannot write something irrelevant in your goals. And it should be time-based. It means that, as I told you, it should be specified that you're going to get this goal in this period of time, in the year 2020, okay? So that's what you do for writing the objectives and goals, specific objectives. And then you have goals. Goals are the parts for Persian writers that we call it أهداف کاربردی, okay? It means what you're going to get after all, after doing all these work, after putting all these efforts, what you're going to get, okay? For example, in the example that I have given you, you can say, my goal is to decrease the severity of COVID-19 disease in patients admitted to Children's Medical Center. That's my goal, okay? Something you're going to get after all, okay? For myself and for my classmates, when we were younger, that was a hard part to write. It was a little complicated, but I tried to explain it, you know, in a simple way. If you have any questions in this area, please ask now. Thank you, Ranga. Any other questions? We will be talking about variables. Yeah, of course, we're going to talk. Okay. So if there are no questions, we will proceed. The next part is questions and hypotheses. Okay. You will write these questions and hypothesis part for studies that seek relationships, for studies that are going to be conducted in the area of finding a relationship, okay? Like what I told you about before, the relationship between the factors, some factors, and the severity of COVID-19, okay? Then you will propose some hypothesis or questions. There is no need to write both of them, really, okay? We can say there is a correlation between age and COVID-19 disease, okay? There is a correlation, and then the rest of the title, of course, in children admitted to Children's Medical Center in 2020. There is a correlation between underlying diseases, between having an underlying disease and severity of COVID-19 disease in children admitted to Children's Medical Center in the year 2020. Okay, like that. So only for the studies that work on the relationships, you should write in this part in form of a hypothesis or a question. In the question form, you can say, is there any correlation between the severity of COVID-19 disease and sex of the children admitted to Children's Medical Center in the year 2020? Okay, that's how you write it. Okay, so then we reach the part of the methodology. We're not going to talk about it today because it's really time consuming, but in this session that I'm going to talk about EndNote, in the beginning, I will talk about the research design and method. Okay, I think it's a little maybe more related, not much related to EndNote really, but I will introduce it in the beginning of the EndNote session. Okay. So here is the variable table that I was talking about. The next section in your proposal form is the variable table. Here this is the exact parts snipped from your proposal sheet. The first part is the variable name, then that's the definition of the variable. You should provide a good definition, okay? For example, you're going to write about the relationship between the severity of COVID-19 and some associated factors, okay? This table, although it may seem time-consuming, is really, I mean, literally compensating for the time it takes, because later on when you're going to do the job, you will be happy that you have written something like that before, because there will be less faults, there will be less problems. Okay, for example, I have talked a lot about the severity of COVID-19 today, okay, but I might not have really considered how to calculate, how to measure the severity of COVID-19. I just say the severity of COVID-19, but what do I mean by severity of COVID-19? Do I mean that the inflammatory markers are high? Do I mean the patients with high inflammatory marker numbers, for example, high ESR and high CRPs? Do I mean the patients that have become intubated and admitted in ICU? Do I mean the patients that have been admitted in the hospital for a very long time? Okay, what specifically do I mean by a severe COVID-19 disease? Okay, here I will write the variable severity of COVID-19 disease and I will define it. I will define that the severity of COVID-19 disease means those patients with COVID-19 disease who have been admitted in ICU, for example, and then I will in the measurement method, I will explain that the measurement method is a file of the patient, and then the scale is positive or negative, whether the patient was admitted in the ICU or not. Okay, the scale here means how you're going to measure that. Okay, for example, if your variable is age, then your scale will be years. Okay, if your variable is height, then your scale will be meters or centimeters. If your variable is a variable with a yes/no answer, for example, if the patient was admitted in the ICU or not, then the scale will be yes or no, positive or negative. Okay, So here, because I had to write down the definition, I understood what I'm going to do with the severity of COVID-19 disease. Could you explain how to determine variables or what are variables with more examples? Yes. For example, in this, Abis, can you tell me your topic? Is it possible for you? Do you want me to explain it for you more, or you want me to give my own example?
Can you hear my voice?
Yes, of course. Nice.
Okay. So my topic is, so I'm not an MD student. I mean, I am, but I'm doing this for my MSc. So
Okay.
what I'm working on is, what I'm doing is, I am trying to find out the effect of treatment A, which is kinesiotaping, and treatment B, which is dry needling, on the hamstring muscle, and I want to know which treatment is better, and stuff like that. My doubt was in terms of variables. I just don't get the whole idea of like, how do I know if this is going to be a variable or if this is not a variable? That confusion. I don't know if I'm able to tell you what I mean.
So you're going to compare the effects of treatment A and treatment B on something. Yeah?
Yes, on the hamstring muscle. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to compare. Let me write
Yes.
it here now. Compare the effects. And is that going to be clinical trial?
It is.
Treatment A and treatment B. Okay. So that's your topic. Okay. So first of all, you should know what you're comparing in these treatments. Okay. For example, how are you going to say that treatment A is better than treatment B? Is the patient going to, for example, live longer? Is the patient going to, for example, recover earlier? Is the patient's serum marker? What determinants are going to show that treatment A is better than treatment B? Do you know that? Did they tell you that?
Like I said, so this is more in terms of it is a sports medicine sort of a topic.
Okay.
My interventions, only dry needling is something which is invasive. The other one is a topical kinesiology tape. The outcome is basically in the length of hamstring muscle. I want to know if treatment A helps me in elongating that muscle, or is it treatment B?
So what you're comparing between these two treatments is the length of the hamstring muscle.
Yes. And in terms of variables, I did not get the whole concept of how do I, now I know this, that this is what I'm doing, but how do I find out what will be my variables in, let's say, my topic for now?
Okay.
Yeah.
So as I understand it, the basic thing that you're going to do is to compare whether treatment A makes a difference in the elongation of the hamstring muscle or treatment B. That's right? Okay. So
yes.
Yeah. So the main work that you're going to do is that. And the first thing that you want to know is the length of the hamstring muscle. So that's one important variable of yours. Okay. You want to compare that in treatment A and treatment B. Okay. That same variable. Okay. This is one variable. It might be one variable. Okay. But it has different measurements. Okay, in treatment A and treatment B. And for example, if you're going to analyze in SPSS, that one variable is enough for you. Okay, just having two groups with one variable is enough for you. Okay, so that's one important variable of yours, the length of hamstring muscle. So what you're going to write is the first variable, length of hamstring muscle, and then it will be in millimeters, for example, or micrometers, nanometers, anything. I think it's millimeters, and the scale parts. In the definition, you should provide a definition for length of the hamstring muscle. For example, the length of the hamstring muscle after the operation in terms of that is مثلا that is calculated by this procedure, for example, okay? And then you will specify the type of your variable that I will talk about here later, okay? And that's it. So this is the first one, okay? But the other ones, as long as I understand here, you do not need any other variable for your work unless you're going to do something more. For example, your supervisor tells you that I want to know if sex is important too. Sex is a determinant in the length of the hamstring muscle too. Okay, or age is important too. Or for example, the how should I say, the drug that the patient has been given for a long time is important too. Okay, did you understand what I told you here? So the basic thing that you're going to do is that, but if you're going to understand that too, that the other factors that are going to be effective on that, then you can include them, but you should ask your supervisor about it, and you can search the literature too. If you're interested in doing a better work, I think you should do that, because you're going to do something really interesting, the length of the hamstring muscle that I have not heard of before. But gathering the other data is really easy, like the age and sex, and for example, the drugs that the patient has been given and something like that. Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to finalize the things that I said about the variables here in this slide. And because the class was supposed to be started at 4, we're going to stop for now, and then we will explain the rest of the proposal writing in the next class, okay? The only thing that is left here in the variable list is the type of the variable, okay? We have 4 main types of variables. In fact, 2 main types that are divided into, each of them is divided into 2 types. We have qualitative and quantitative variables, okay? Here you can see the qualitative variable and quantitative variables. The qualitative variables are divided into these 2 types, nominal and ordinal. Okay, the nominal variables are the ones that are used only to name or to label. Okay, for example, sex, we say male and female, they're only names. There is no priority. Of course, there is no priority between for a female for a male, or a male for a female. Okay, so these are only names, and the variables are nominal, or blood groups A, B, O. Okay, but ordinal variables are the variables that have a kind of category, you know. There are also qualitative, they are not quantitative, you cannot quantify them, okay, but there is some kind of ordinary relationship between them. For example, a Likert scale is a very good example. Here, this is a question that we can ask: how satisfied are you with, for example, the purchasing system in that special application? Okay, you can choose very unsatisfied, unsatisfied, neutral, satisfied, very satisfied. This is ordinal. These have some priority, you know, but there is no number. Okay, even if I give a number here to this very unsatisfied, for example, 1, this unsatisfied 2, neutral 3, these numbers do not have values, you know. 3 is not 1 more than 2. Okay, I hope you understand that. These are only numbers that I have given to something that I have just attributed to something, you know. They do not show any value. Okay, these are ordinal variables. But the next types of variables are the quantitative variables. The quantitative variables can be continuous or discrete. Okay, continuous variables are continuous variables, like for example, when you're going to put a measurement, for example, the length of the hamstring muscle. Okay, it can be 1 millimeter or 1.1 millimeter or 1.01 millimeter. Okay, it's continuous, there is no limit. But the discrete variables are the ones, the numeric ones, that have certain possible values. Okay, for example, you can say the number of visits to hospital in the recent year. It should be 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. It cannot be 1.5. It cannot be 1.2. Okay, so these are discrete numbers. Okay, they can only have whole numbers. And when you have understood what you're going to do, what variable is going to have an effect on the other variable, you can understand whether the variable is independent or dependent. For example, in the example that Abis has kindly given us, if we are going to evaluate the effect of age on the length of the hamstring muscle, then the hamstring muscle is the dependent variable. It's dependent on the age of the patient. The age of the patient, of course, is not dependent on the length of the hamstring muscle, okay? In this correlated, in fact, relationship between these two variables, one of them is dependent and the other one is independent. For example, the relationship between sex and the length of the hamstring muscle. Of course, sex is independent and the dependent one is the length of the hamstring muscle. Are we clear with the variable part? Okay. Okay, great. So guys, let's stop here. I think you have become tired. And think about your questions. In the next session, I will be happy to answer them if there are any vague parts. You're welcome. You're very welcome. And I hope I will be able to see you the next Wednesday. You're welcome. You're welcome, guys. Goodbye. Linda, I will ask Lindell why I hope I have read it correctly. I will ask Dr. Ziai to share the recording. I hope I can get it from him. And then I will give it to Ranga, okay? You're welcome. Goodbye, guys. Also, could you give us your email or contact? Yes, this is my number. And this is my email. Okay, have a nice day, guys. Goodbye. You're welcome. Bye.